What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the 5-Minute Debate. This week, I am joined by a very special guest. We have Brown, Hutchinson, as you may know him from Twitter. But what's going on, man?
I'm good, man. I'm super happy to be here, and I'm just so excited to debate Robert Woods and Diontae Johnson today.
This is going to be a good one. I already know. I know I'm on the losing side of this. Like I'm aware of what Twitter thinks.
Yeah,
but
we're on the losing side right now. But
yeah, it happened so fast. The quick 30 minutes, and I know I'm down in the poll. But we'll get to the poll results. At the end of the debate here. Before we kind of just dive in, why don't you share with everybody, where they can find your work, stuff about your podcast, anything you want to get out to the people.
All right, so yeah, my name is Hutchinson Brown. You can find me on Twitter at TYFMNFL, and it stands for the Young Fantasy Mind NFL. My podcast name is the Young Fantasy Mind Football Podcast. You can find it pretty much Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, most of the major podcast platforms.
Yeah, the places people listen to podcasts.
Pretty much all the places people listen to podcasts. You can check out my website, theyoungfantasymind.com. You can find my official half PPR rankings over there. You can also just listen to the podcast over there as well. And the latest thing I've been doing with the podcast, we're wrapping up a hit rate series where I discuss the hit rates on certain players in certain positions of your fantasy drafts, of your redraft fantasy drafts. It's been a real learning curve these last 4 episodes. It's been a real learning curve just looking at the numbers and see how different positions hit in different rounds, and it's been really, really fun. Next episode, for the last one, we're talking quarterbacks. Yeah. And we're going to bring on Luke Sayhawk. It's going to be super, super fun.
Yeah, fellow Miami grad. Him and I, or he's still there. I'm older at this point.
He's still
he's still very much in college.
I see him record from his dorm a couple of times. Yeah.
I know the exact building he's in. I know exactly where he's at in the least creepy way possible, I guess. Let's just kind of dive right in. As we said, we are debating Robert Woods versus Diontae Johnson this week. This will be for the redraft season. Again, we do a lot of dynasty stuff, but this is strictly redraft. So you know what? Got to make sure I got it ready. Got the timer here.
Yep.
It's all you, man. Dive in.
All right. So I'm on the Robert Woods side, if you just didn't know that yet. So look, guys, here's my case here. So Robert Woods, over the last 3 seasons, he's been a top 15 PPR wide receiver. He's just always there for your fantasy team, and he's been strictly undervalued over the last 3 seasons. I've loved drafting him over the last few seasons that I've played fantasy football. Right now, he's going off the board at wide receiver 18, and based on history, he's already a lock-in as a value, and he has a safe floor because of his rushing. He has like 200 yards of rushing basically every season. Yeah. Sean McVay loves to use him in the running game, and he's pretty much always been the number 1 guy, even when Cooper Kupp or Tyler Higbee there. He's always been at least the 1A. And now, look, the one big change that's happened is obviously Matthew Stafford, right?
Yep.
How is Stafford going to affect Woods' value? So, look, Stafford, over the last 3 seasons, has had at least a top 20 receiver, right? Kenny Golladay in 2018 was the wide receiver 20 at the end of the season, right? And now things get even better because Golladay was the wide receiver 9 in 2019. Stafford provided that season for him. And then Marvin Jones filling in for Golladay last season was the wide receiver 6. And this is all for standard PPR formats. I used Fantasy Pros stuff for this. And now Stafford's in LA where he just has a great team around him. He has a great offensive line, a great run game, which he didn't have in Detroit. Detroit run game was never really good before DeAndre Swift. And then they've got some great weapons. They've got great defense. Everything is around him to succeed. And he's going to be comfortable in this offense because of the great team around him. And Woods is just going to be a safe PPR option in 2021. Yeah. I do like Johnson's upside, but where you're drafting him, where you're drafting him as a low wide receiver 2, a lot of upside guys are going there. You can't find many guys with the floor of Robert Woods as a top 15 guy. You just can't find many receivers that have that floor there. So that's why I love Woods where he's being drafted more than Diontae Johnson where he's being drafted right now.
Yeah. So obviously this would leave me on the Diontae Johnson side. And for me, the biggest thing is, you just want to talk about a strictly volume play. That is exactly what Diontae Johnson brings. Again, he played 15 games, but in theory, it was much less. He's benched for a half. He left 2 games in the first quarter due to injury. So in reality, you're looking, and then he missed one altogether with injury, which is obviously the fifth, where the 15 comes into play. So you're looking at about 12 games of production. He was top 6 in targets. Every game that he played a full game in, he saw 10 plus targets except for 1. So when you're just looking at a pure volume play, I mean, Diontae's not going to be a big play guy, and granted, neither is Robert Woods, but he's going to see, there's a world he sees 150 targets. He was tracking for well over that. And even with Pittsburgh likely to throw the ball less this season, that volume is going to balance out by just being available for 4 more games. Again, fingers crossed, everything's barring injury. But I think there's just too much volume. And, when you just look at average depth of target at this point in Big Ben's career, Diontae Johnson fits the mold of his favorite wide receiver. He's not going to air it out, and that's fine because Diontae Johnson isn't going to stretch the field. So play style matches well, and that's actually where my concern with Robert Woods comes in, because you want to look at a player that just traditionally has a very low average depth of target. Robert Woods, pair him with a quarterback that loves to air the ball out in Matt Stafford. The reason they brought him in is to stretch the field. It's no longer this dink and dunk game where I think Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, Higbee even are better field stretchers than Robert Woods. That's never been his game. So I do think we could see a bit of a downturn. I still think he's a wide receiver too, locked and loaded. But the top 15 range that we've been seeing him finish, I'm worried. That's my concern, is the pairing with Stafford on paper seems fantastic, but just based on play style and route running, it's a bit of an issue.
Yeah, definitely. It's just the problem for me with Diontae, you mentioned it a little bit. It's gotta be the passing volume and the fact that, look, Big Ben is not good. Big Ben is a terrible.
You're not wrong. I can't argue that.
He's a terrible quarterback. Like, he absolutely sucks. And look, the Steelers were the pass happiest team in football last year, first in pass attempts. And look, you bring in a guy like Najee Harris, who can take a 300 carry workload. Like, Najee is a workhorse running back. And like recently, with Lev Bell, they were very run heavy. They could go back to that run heavy scheme. And I know Diontae is Big Ben's favorite type of receiver, but the problem is you can't just ignore Claypool and Juju and Najee even in the passing game in this offense. I think Diontae doesn't see a crazy 10 plus targets per game. He'll still see some nice volume.
Yeah, he'll be less for sure.
Yeah, he'll be a top 10 volume guy in the NFL. But look, as you said, like, injuries are concerned. The drops are a huge concern. And just Big Ben, the way he played, it's just a big, big concern. Robert Woods he's just been productive for the last 3 seasons. He has a better quarterback. And I know it doesn't really fit his play style, but Stafford can work with the short game. He did a lot of dump offs to DeAndre Swift and his running backs last season.
Yep.
He can play in the short game as well, and he can adjust his game because it's not like they have elite deep weapons like
it's Deshaun Jackson.
Deshaun Jackson, old and bust. I mean, as much as I hate to say it as an Eagles fan, I love Deshaun Jackson. But
he's so dusty.
Deshaun Jackson's done. DUN done. Van Jefferson was not impressive his rookie year.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp is not a crazy downfield guy. Tyler Higbee is not a downfield guy. Robert Woods is a downfield guy. So you don't really have guys to throw downfield to. And I mean, like, so what are you going to do? Like, I think Stafford's just going to have to change his game because it's just not there.
That's the interesting part. Because I feel like they did. Again, we're over the 5. It's whatever. It's nobody cares. Stafford. The reason they did bring him in, it has to be to stretch the field because, I mean, Jared Goff is the dump off king. Him, Rivers, Big Ben. Again, even just those kind of guys cannot make plays down the field, and I feel like that's the reason you go and get a guy like Stafford. But again, it's gonna be interesting to see. They're going to be one of the more interesting offenses to watch just because McVay is such an offensive mastermind that, again, I have all the faith in the world in him. However, I think Cooper Kupp ends up being the 1A this year. So again, you guys decide, let us know in the comments, like, subscribe, do whatever you got to do, and let us know who won. But before we go, we do have the Twitter poll. So let me pull it up here, and I am just getting smoked. Yeah, it's tough. So, okay, we saw for about 30 minutes, got 106 votes on it. and we're looking at 57.5% for Robert Woods, 42.5% for Diontae Johnson.
I mean, honestly, that's not very far off.
I thought it'd be closer, and it's
yeah, I thought it'd be a little closer too. I thought it'd be like 53, 47, 51, 49, something like that. But
yeah, but it's Twitter. I'll take, that's a close pull for Twitter as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
All right, man. This was fantastic, Hutch. I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you share again your podcast, where they can find you before we get out of here.
All right, so Twitter at TYFMNFL. It's my little username down here on the screen. And then Young Fantasy Mind Football Podcast, as I mentioned earlier, Apple, Spotify, most podcast platforms. You can find it, theyoungfantasymind.com. You can find my rankings, half PPR rankings. You could also find the podcast on the website as well. And the most recent thing we're doing on the podcast, we're doing hit rates. As I said earlier, we're looking at certain positions in certain rounds, where they hit most often, and just talking about why you should draft certain positions, certain rounds based on their hit rates and based on how cheap they are. And next episode on Tuesday, we're talking with Luke Sayhawk, and we're talking the quarterback hit rates, and that'll wrap up the series.
No, man, that's fantastic. I'm going to make sure to obviously tune in. So, shoot me actually a DM when that does go live, because I'm excited to check all that out. And you know what, everybody, thanks for listening. Another great debate, if you want to call it that. And we will see you guys next week.